Fourth Conference on Financing for Development starting next week will be an important moment for the world to fix and strengthen this essential engine. We must renew domestic and global commitments to get public and private finance flowing to the areas of greatest need. We need to provide urgent debt relief for countries drowning in unsustainable debt service. And we must reform the global financial architecture to reflect today's realities and the urgent needs of developing countries. At its core, this plan is about supporting countries as they advance both peace and sustainable development, to ensure food security, education, health care, decent work, and social protection, to invest in green technology and resilience to climate disasters and shocks, to build roads and water and food systems, to deliver electricity to all, to close the digital divide and expand internet access to all while guarding against the perils of new technologies, to build justice and governance systems people can trust, and to open the doors of participation so women and young people can build a more equitable, peaceful, and sustainable future. Monsieur le Président, Excellences, la paix ne se construit pas dans les salles de conférence. Elle se construit dans les salles de classe, dans les cliniques, dans les communautés. La paix se construit lorsque les populations ont de l'espoir, des opportunités et un véritable avenir entre leurs mains. Investir dans le développement aujourd'hui, c'est investir dans un avenir plus pacifique. Réaffirmons notre attachement à la solidarité et à l'esprit de multilatéralisme qui ont façonné notre organisation depuis 80 ans. Et veillons à ce que les dividendes de la paix, de la prospérité et de la sécurité profitent à toutes et tous.
Beneficial to all and shared by all.
I thank the Secretary General for his briefing. I now give the floor to Ms. Kani Wignaraga.
Thank you, Mr. President. Excellencies, I thank the government of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana for convening this important debate. It is an honor to join you on behalf of the United Nations Development Programme. And the conversation could not be more prescient. Global human development has stalled just as violent conflicts have surged to levels not seen in 8 decades. The coincidence is not lost on us, nor is it accidental. It reflects deep vulnerabilities left unattended that have resulted in severe peace and security breakdowns. The 2025 UNDP Human Development Report shows the sharpest global drop in human development in over 2 decades. For the first time in 35 years, progress in human development has slowed so significantly that over half of the world's poorest countries have yet to recover to pre-pandemic levels. This means that over 1 billion people live in acute multidimensional poverty, nearly half in contexts affected by conflict or fragility. And these figures are not just statistics, they are warnings. Every time governance and development falters, and the two are closely interwoven, based on the choices and decisions leaders take vis-à-vis their people, their neighbors, and sometimes countries far from their own borders. When these international and local social contracts fail, conflict gains ground. From Gaza to Myanmar, from Sudan to Afghanistan, it shows that conflict hits GDP fast and drives a deeper level of poverty and despair that is not seen in more usual economic slowdowns. In Myanmar, for example, UNDP's analysis shows that urban poverty in Yangon alone surged from 10% to 43% in just the last few years. IMF's messaging is also clear. Every $1 invested in prevention can save up to $103 in a ballooning conflict-related costs, quell humanitarian needs, and advance on lost economic output. So let me offer 3 priorities for investment that can help break this cycle based on practice on the ground, or at least pause it to allow peace negotiations and interventions to be realized. First, directly protecting the household economy. In fragile settings where peace and security have been shattered, development that goes directly to the local level becomes the first line of people's defense and survival, and their hope for recovery. From these local economies, where livelihoods are restored, water and electricity can flow again, women's businesses in particular reopen, and farmers can trade food, and there is basic finance to allow markets to stay afloat. From this comes the resources to build back broken capabilities and resilience. In Afghanistan, for example, UNDP has supported over 80,000 women entrepreneurs. These micro and small businesses have directly created jobs for close to 500,000 people, generating income and independence for 2.7 million people. What stronger illustration of the need for investing in people's ability to navigate crisis, and this cannot be done through short-term relief alone. Second, addressing the climate crisis through the lens of human security. Climate change, as we know, is a crisis amplifier that compounds vulnerabilities and is driving people to move in the millions to find arable land, shelter, food, and water. We are seeing the mounting displacement this is causing around the world. In Nigeria, climate peace hubs are now addressing root causes of insecurity in the country's northwest. These hubs provide climate resilience, data systems, and are incubating great green jobs for youth and women in places like Katsina and Sokoto. In Rakhine State, in Myanmar, what peace if there always looms the threat of famine, compounded by a civil war, as is the case today? So integrating climate-driven adaptation and risk reduction with investment in food, water, and renewable energy systems, and I emphasize systems, is a must. Third, addressing these pressures well beyond national borders. These compounded risks travel fast, and today we see the UNODC analysis that shows that these accelerants drive illegal activity across borders using parts of our regions that have less rule of law and security. Take Haiti and its surrounding seas, the Sahel region, and an expanded, lucrative drug trade and human trafficking through the Golden Triangle today. And yet, development interventions brings hope. In the Lake Chad Basin, every €1 in co-funding has unlocked nearly 60 euros in additional resources so the UN can do its work. We have stabilized communities, enabling over 500,000 internally displaced people to return home. In closing, Mr. President, for UNDP and the UN development system, building peace means creating conditions that prevent conflict. And these foundations can and will continue to shake with the meltdowns of economies, governance changes, and resource scarcity driven by climate change. And they will shake and break due to wars and conflicts. But that does not mean we give up and stop investing in development. On the contrary, it must remain an ongoing, intentional global project, so to speak, to keep building back people's capabilities, their institutions, that ensure stability and put back human development progress, social cohesion, trust in leadership, and functioning institutions. This is why for agencies like UNDP, annual expenditure, over half of it now goes to fragile and crisis-affected contexts. So we see FFD, as SG said, and the ongoing peace-building architecture review as a timely opportunity to strengthen the role of development actors in addressing the structural causes of conflict and to align efforts across the HDP nexus. So we welcome Guyana's leadership in advancing the climate, peace, and security agenda and reaffirming the need to invest in an inclusive, climate-smart, risk-informed human development, which is to invest in peace and to bring people safely home.
I thank Ms. Wignaraja for her briefing. I now give the floor to His Excellency, Mr. Mahood Ali Yusuf.
Mr. President, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the African Union Commission, I convey our sincere appreciation to the Cooperative Republic of Guyana for convening this high-level open debate on a theme of profound strategic importance. It reflects a bold recognition that the root causes of conflict, poverty, inequality, and underdevelopment must be squarely addressed if we are to preserve international peace and security in a meaningful and sustainable way. This conversation echoes the very foundations of the African Union's Agenda 2063, our blueprint for integrated, prosperous, and peaceful Africa, driven by its own citizens. At the heart of Agenda 2063 is the recognition that Africa's development is linked with its peace and stability, and we must tackle the structural conditions that perpetuate fragility, marginalization, and violence. Excellencies, poverty and underdevelopment are not merely symptoms. They are enablers of conflict. They create spaces of despair in which extremist ideologies, criminal networks, and cycles of violence find fertile ground. The hard reality is that wherever the guns are loudest, human development is weakest. In turn, where poverty and exclusion persist, peace remains elusive. This is precisely why the African Union launched the flagship initiative, Silencing the Guns in Africa. This initiative is not simply about disarmament or ending armed conflict. It is a comprehensive agenda for eliminating the socioeconomic and governance conditions that fuel violence, especially in fragile and conflict-affected areas. Silencing the Guns recognizes that we cannot bomb our way to peace. Instead, we must invest in justice, dignity, and opportunity. It is a call to shift from crisis response to conflict prevention, from managing violence to transforming the conditions that give rise to it. The initiative calls on all stakeholders, member states, regional economic communities, civil society, youth, and international partners to work in concert to prevent conflicts, mediate disputes, and rebuild lives and livelihoods. Central to this effort is tackling poverty not as an afterthought, but as a security imperative. We know, for instance, that in regions where access to education, healthcare, and employment is limited, the prospects for peace are diminished. Where young people see no future, they are more susceptible to recruitment by armed groups and less invested in state institutions. This is why Silencing the Guns is deeply aligned with the goals of the African Continental Free Trade Area, the African Governance Architecture, and the post-conflict reconstruction and development frameworks. These instruments work together to lay the foundations for durable peace by promoting inclusive economic growth, accountable governance, and resilient institutions. Excellencies, Africa loses billions of dollars annually to conflict resources that could otherwise be channeled into schools, hospitals, infrastructure, and innovation. Conflict robs children from their education, communities from their cohesion, and economies of their momentum. If we are seriously about breaking the cycle of violence, then we must build peace through development and develop through peace. We must also acknowledge that poverty and underdevelopment are not confined within national borders, nor their consequences. These are global challenges that demand a global response, one rooted in justice, equity, and shared responsibilities. If we are to uphold international peace and security, we must address the systemic imbalances, economic, political, and institutional, that continue to fuel deprivation, exclusion, and instability across regions. The African Union urges the international community to enhance support to African-led peace operations, particularly those deployed in regions where poverty and underdevelopment are deeply entrenched. This includes providing predictable and sustainable financing through United Nations assessed contributions. Peace efforts that are not backed by adequate resources risk reinforcing the very vulnerabilities they seek to address. Furthermore, we reiterate the urgent need to reform the architecture of global governance. Africa must have a rightful voice and a meaningful role in shaping the decisions that affect its peace and development trajectory. Our continent must no longer be seen only as a theater of crisis, but as a contributor to global solutions, an equal partner in building a more just and secure world. The Silencing the Guns initiative speaks directly to this objective. It is not just about ending conflict, it's a long-term strategy to address the structural root causes of violence, in particular poverty, inequality, and the persistent denial of opportunity. Every child denied access to education, every young person without employment, and every community left behind by development represents a risk to stability and a lost opportunity for peace. We must therefore recommit ourselves to bold and coordinated action that addresses the root causes of conflict with the same urgency that we devote to their consequences. Our response must be transformative, guided not only by security imperatives, but also by a profound sense of moral and development urgency. On behalf of the African Union, I reaffirm our unwavering commitment to work closely with the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, the wider United Nations membership, and all partners to end poverty, prevent conflict, and build a peaceful, just, and resilient global order where no one is left behind. I thank you.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Yusuf for his briefing. I shall now make a statement in my capacity as Minister for Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana. Excellencies, we meet today amidst immense challenges to international peace and security. This is manifested in the unprecedented number of conflicts and growing tensions in many parts of the world, where peace is becoming increasingly fragile. As challenges to international peace and security evolve, so too must our approach to resolving and preventing conflict. This requires us to delve deeper, including by addressing the root causes of conflict. For this reason, Guyana has chosen to focus today's debate on poverty, underdevelopment, and its implications for the maintenance of international peace and security. I thank the Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, for his insightful perspective offered on this important topic. I also thank Assistant Secretary General, Ms. Kani Wignaraja of the UNDP, and His Excellency Mr. Mahmoud Ali Yusuf, Chairperson of the African Union Commission, for their contributions. Excellencies, peace and security cannot be divorced from development. Poverty and underdevelopment are common features across many of the situations of which the Security Council is seized. As a matter of course, the Council must also apply a development lens in carrying out its mandate. This has been acknowledged by the Council on several occasions. For example, in January 1992, in a presidential statement at the first meeting of the Security Council held at the level of heads of state and government, the Council affirmed that peace and prosperity are indivisible, and lasting peace and stability will require effective international cooperation for the eradication of poverty and the promotion of a better life for all in larger freedom. This remains relevant today, perhaps even more so when global development challenges are deepening. We should also be concerned about the 83% of the targets of the Sustainable Development Goals will not be met by 2030. This is borne out in UNDP's recent multidimensional poverty index, which highlighted that 1.1 billion people still live in multidimensional poverty, with most of 500 million residing in countries affected by violent conflict. Moreover, the 2025 World Social Report warned that an escalation of ongoing conflicts or the emergence of new conflicts would lead to further setbacks in the global effort to eradicate poverty and address underdevelopment. The world therefore stands at a critical juncture where the interlinkages between peace and security and development have never been more pronounced. This requires collective and decisive action. In this context, I proffer the following points for consideration. Prioritizing only political solutions in conflicts where poverty and underdevelopment feature prominently will not lead to a comprehensive and sustainable peace. It is equally critical to create conditions for socio-economic stability and well-being. We must therefore address, inter alia, lack of economic opportunities, lack of access to education, underemployment, and exclusion. It is also important to strengthen national institutions as part of peace-building efforts, including those institutions that foster social and economic development. Our global institutions must support these efforts. We have been speaking for decades about the need for reform of the international financial institutions. We must also see this reform as important for peace and stability and security. In fact, there is truth in the saying that being poor is expensive, since developing countries expend more to access finance. The global financial architecture should be more responsive to the needs of developing countries as a whole, particularly countries transitioning out of conflict. This is critical for de-risking and resilience building. I underscore the example, the IMF's conclusion that every $1 spent on conflict prevention in countries with recent violence could save up to $103 in costs. Sound macroeconomic policies and international support for these policies can play key roles in conflict prevention. This should be an element in the Council's early recovery efforts. This brings me to my next point. Participation of women and youth as part of a broader approach to peace and security. Currently, the global youth population is the highest in history, with most young people concentrated in developing countries. For us to harness their full potential, they must be given adequate economic opportunities and be involved in decision-making on peace and security. This is also a deterrent to recruitment and radicalization by terrorists and armed groups. It is instructive that a 2023 UNDP report found that economic motivation was the #1 reason for young people joining and leaving extremist groups. Ideology was less of a factor. I also underscore concerted and determined action that address the root causes of conflicts requires a comprehensive approach to women's involvement in peace and security issues, as this Council has long recognized. Excellencies, as UN observes the 80th year of its establishment, We must reaffirm equally the three pillars on which this organization is built and the interconnection between those pillars. In the ongoing engagements on reform of the UN in the context of the UN 80 observance, we should ensure that any recalibration does not result in reducing the UN's role in development, global development, peace and security, and human rights. Greater coordination and complementarity within the UN system on these issues are critical. The Security Council cannot operate in silos. I thank you. I resume my function as President of the Council. I now give the floor to the representative of the Republic of Korea.
Mr. President, the Republic of Korea commends Guyana, presidency of the Security Council, for convening this open debate. I also thank the Secretary General for sharing his valuable insights, and ASG Khani Wignaraja and Chairperson Mahmoud Ali Yusuf for their informative briefings. This year marks the 80th anniversary of the United Nations, yet the world is experiencing its most conflict-ridden period since the Second World War, and many of today's crises cannot be attributed solely to geopolitical or ethnic tensions. Beneath the surface of these crises lie deeper root causes and drivers of conflict, such as poverty, underdevelopment, inequality, and weak governing institutions. These structural issues are further compounded by climate change and food insecurity. There is no doubt about the importance of addressing these challenges in an integrated and coherent manner, taking into account both the security and development pillars. Korea's own development experience over the past 7 decades serves as a compelling testament to this nexus. And it is from this experience that we know that the three pillars of the United Nations, namely peace and security, development, and human rights, are equally important, interlinked, and mutually reinforcing. In this regard, I'd like to highlight the following points today from the perspective of the Security Council. First, the Council should further leverage the complementary role of the Peace-Building Commission in promoting sustaining peace. The PBC's unique convening and bridging role is an essential part of the international community's peace-building and conflict prevention efforts. Through its advisory function, the PBC can contribute to incorporating long-term peace-building considerations into the Council's deliberations. A notable example is a drawdown of the UN mission in Liberia in 2018, where the PBC contributed to the Secretary General's peace-building plan at the Council's request under Resolution 2333. We look forward to the upcoming peace-building architecture review as a key opportunity to advance such a complementarity. Korea will continue to foster such collaboration in our capacity as the informal coordinator between the Security Council and the PBC. Second, the Council should make efforts to reflect elements of humanitarian development peace nexus in UN peace operation mandates and exit strategies in order to effectively translate peace gains achieved through UN peace operations into sustained socio-economic development. In this regard, their collaboration and coordination with UN country teams, agencies, funds and programs are critical. The mandate of MINUSCA offers a good example of this comprehensive approach. By supporting the extension of state authority and promoting economic recovery and development in tandem with its core mandate to protect civilians, MINUSCA is helping to lay the foundation for long-term peace through strengthened national capacities and resilient institutions. Third, the Council should take into account the views of different stakeholders to gain a deeper and context-specific understanding of conflicts. It is essential to heed the voices of women, youth, and civil society in peace processes, as they offer insights into the root causes of the conflict and provide valuable guidance for addressing them effectively. Fourth, the Council should draw upon the expertise and responsibilities of regional and sub-regional organizations. Given the complex and multifaceted nature of today's challenges, sustainable peace and development cannot be achieved by the UN alone. These organizations are often trusted actors with both proximity and capacity to respond effectively, as demonstrated by the African Union's support mission in Somalia, the ASEAN Special Envoy's engagement in Myanmar, and the CARICOM's support for Haiti. Such strategic partnerships can better inform the Council's decisions by anchoring them in local realities for more effective response to conflicts and crises. Mr. President, in conclusion, the Republic of Korea has much to share with the international community from its concurrent journey of economic development and political democratization. We reaffirm our strong commitment to contributing to our shared goal of sustaining peace through a holistic and inclusive approach. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the Republic of Korea for this statement. I now give the floor to the representative of the United Kingdom.
Thank you, President. And I want to start by thanking the Secretary-General and our distinguished briefers today. The United Kingdom is grateful to Guyana for convening this important open debate, underlining the challenges of poverty and underdevelopment. At the core of the 2030 Agenda is the understanding that human rights, peace and security, and development are deeply interlinked and mutually reinforcing. The theme of Guyana's Council tenure, partnering for peace and prosperity, reminds us of the importance of working together to address these challenges effectively. I'll make 3 points. First, we need to equip the UN system to deliver more integrated solutions to these challenges, especially in fragile and conflict-affected states. This means aligning humanitarian, development, and peace and security efforts, targeting the drivers of conflict, and using robust analysis and early warning systems to shape the UN's responses. And it means strengthening cooperation between the UN and the international financial institutions. We should seize the opportunities offered by UN80 to drive this approach forward. Second, member states agreed in the Pact for the Future that we need to strengthen national conflict prevention strategies. The United Kingdom welcomes the initiatives taken by the Peacebuilding Commission and the Peacebuilding Fund to support countries to this end. And we hope that the 2025 Peacebuilding Architecture Review will increase the momentum behind this work. Third, as the Secretary-General highlighted, local ownership and inclusivity are key to fostering sustainable development and enduring peace. As we mark the 25th anniversary of this Council's landmark resolution on women, peace and security, it remains vital to ensure the full, equal, meaningful and safe participation of women in political and peace processes. And I echo your emphasis, President, on this aspect. And the United Kingdom is proud to have partnered closely with Guyana in this area, including in the development of Guyana's own National Action Plan on Women, Peace and Security. President, it is all too evident that poverty and underdevelopment can exacerbate the drivers of conflict. The world's poorest people are particularly vulnerable to the immediate harms caused by conflict. And conflict sets back development gains, often for decades, as the Secretary-General reminded us. The United Kingdom is committed to working with all partners and stakeholders to ensure that the UN system can support coordinated responses to these interlinked challenges. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Somalia.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, thank you. At the outset, let me express our sincere gratitude to the Guyanese presidency for convening this timely and important debate. Your leadership in bringing these deeply interconnected issues to the forefront is highly appreciated and reflects profound wisdom and vision. I thank the UN Secretary General, Chairperson of the African Union Commission, and UNDP ASG for their insightful contribution and valuable perspective to our debate today. As a proud African nation, it is a privilege to join this conversation as the United Nations celebrates the 80th anniversary of the signing of its charter, a document born of hope and tempered by the tragedies of history. Nowhere are the interlocking challenges of poverty, housing, underdevelopment, and conflict more visible than in Africa, where these forces, shaped by both temporary obstacles and enduring colonial legacies, continue to block our people's hopes for peace and progress. Africa's experience proves time and again there is no lasting peace without meaningful development, and no real development without peace. Yet Africa also bears witness to the power of resilience, solidarity, and innovation. Across our continent, communities rebuild and reconcile. Leaders invest in education and opportunity, and regional organizations act as first responders. But there is a lot more to be done. These efforts, while courageous, must be matched by a Security Council and a United Nations that recognize the indivisibility of peace and development. We welcome the Security Council's acknowledgement that tackling conflict's root causes is vital to its mission. Over the years, the Council has adopted various resolutions and presidential statements recognizing the critical link between security and development. Still, as highlighted by the 2025 World Social Report and the 2024 Global Multidimensional Poverty Index, far more must be done to break the destructive chain linking poverty and violence, including addressing legacies of exploitation and marginalization. In this context, Somalia urged the Security Council to deepen its cooperation with the other UN organizations, particularly the General Assembly, ECOSOC, and the Peacebuilding Commission, to ensure a coherent, integrated approach to conflict prevention, peace building, and development. We also call for stronger cooperation and support in silencing the guns for regional and sub-regional organizations in Africa, which are often first to respond when early warning signs of crisis emerge. But conflict prevention and peace building go beyond coordination. They require investments through fair trade, real fair trade, and co-financing. Greater resources must be directed towards prevention, resilience, and inclusive economic growth. Every dollar invested in prevention saves countless more in the cost of conflict, including peacekeeping and humanitarian assistance. The Council should promote development-focused mandates and back national and local efforts to tackle inequality, foster good governance, and create opportunities for youth and marginalized communities. At the same time, we cannot ignore the broader global structures that perpetuate underdevelopment and instability. We urge urgent reform of international financial institutions and advocate for comprehensive debt relief for developing countries, without which sustainable peace and development will remain elusive. We must also stem the tide of illicit financial flows that rob our nations of critical resources and address the unfinished business of colonial legacies that continue to shape patterns of deprivation and exclusion. As we consider the challenges before us, let's remember that the primary responsibility for peace building lies with national governments, of course, but that international solidarity is indispensable. The Council's actions must reflect the voices and priorities of those most affected and be tailored to the specific drivers of conflict in each setting. Mr. President, in conclusion, for Africa and for many developing nations, the quest for peace and sustainable development cannot be separated from the enduring shadow of colonialism. Decades after independence, our societies are still contending with the legacies left behind. Arbitrary borders that divide communities, economic structures designed for dependency rather than self-sufficiency, and political institutions often shaped to serve distant interests rather than local needs. These colonial legacies remain powerful drivers of conflict, perpetuating cycles of poverty, inequality, and instability. Mr. President, Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, those who oversee and benefit from the systems that perpetuate exclusion and inequality possess the power and responsibility to choose a different path. we emphasize, unless we are willing to confront these historical injustices head-on, unless we commit to addressing the root causes of conflict by promoting equitable development, good governance, and fair trade policies, unless we recommit and strengthen multilateralism as an indispensable foundation for collective progress. Our pursuit, Mr. President, of peace and sustainability and sustainable development will remain incomplete. And the promise of the United Nations Charter will remain unfulfilled for millions. Only by dismantling the enduring systems of dependency and exclusion can we give all peoples a fair chance to shape their own destinies and secure a future built on dignity, prosperity, justice, and hope. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Somalia for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of the United States of America.
Thank you, Mr. President, Minister Hugh Todd, for convening today's important discussion. And thank you also to Secretary General Antonio Guterres, Assistant Secretary General Kani Wignandra, and AU Commission Chairperson Mahmoud Ali Youssef for your remarks. 80 years ago, the United States helped found the United Nations after World War II to save future generations from the scourge of war. Peace is not merely the absence of conflict, it is the presence of security and opportunity for all. It is the foundation upon which societies can thrive, economies can grow, and human potential can be fully realized. Peace is the essential bedrock upon which we must build our collective futures. This is why the United States supports this Council's return to its founding mission of maintaining peace and security around the world. Mr. President, at the same time, national ownership in both conflict prevention and peacebuilding efforts remain critical to lasting peace. The UN and other international actors alone cannot prevent conflict nor build peace. It is essential that national governments commit to peace and demonstrate that they undertake these commitments seriously. Addressing the causes of conflict is essential for achieving peace and stability. By tackling these underlying factors, national governments can create an environment conducive to long-term prosperity for their citizens. Mr. President, when using peacekeeping and peace-building missions as tools to prevent recurrence of conflict, the UN must engage in integrated planning at both mission and headquarters levels. Peacekeeping missions, for example, need clear end states, measurable goals, and a streamlined support structure to allocate resources responsibly. Evidence-based indicators are essential to demonstrate the impact of peacekeeping missions. As we strive to advance the cause of peace for all humans, depart from the era of barbarism of the past, and restore this body's efforts to securing lasting peace, we call upon members to take their commitments seriously. The United States is committed to working with our partners in the Security Council, regional organizations, and across the UN system to enhance our collective efforts to prevent conflict and build peace to ensure a safer and more prosperous world for all. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of the United States of America for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Algeria.
Thank you, Mr. President. At the outset, I would like to thank you for organizing this high-level debate, which represents a timely opportunity to highlight the links between poverty, sustainable development, peace, and security. I also extend my thanks and appreciation to the Secretary General for his comprehensive briefing, as well as for Mr. Mahmoud Ali Yusuf, Chairperson of the African Union Commission, for his first statement before the Council. Mr. President, we are witnessing critical challenges such as the unprecedented escalation of crisis and new and complex threat that cast a shadow over the socio-economic situation, particularly in the developing countries. Thus, we would like to highlight the following issues. First, the 2030 Agenda offered a vision for a better future, yet we have achieved less than a quarter of its global goals. This lack of progress has an inevitable impact, with poverty rising, especially in conflict-affected regions. This unfortunate trend creates fertile ground for extremism, violence, and terrorism. Given this, we would prioritize both security and development through comprehensive and sustainable solutions. This approach will foster the right condition for development, for peace. Second, efforts to review UN peace operations must consider a broader perspective that does not impede the development dimension of other relevant mechanisms. We therefore call for a comprehensive adaptation process based on mandates designed to support development efforts and promote human rights through effective UN mechanisms. Third, Algeria believes that peace building is a vital tool for post-conflict recovery. This approach prevents a return to violence, strengthens national institutions, and consolidates the principle of justice, of reconciliation, of equality. Fourth, we emphasize strengthening coordination between UN agencies and regional partners. Particularly, we call for deepening cooperation with the African Union. This will unify shared visions for the optimal resource use and address development needs, aligning with African countries' priorities and Agenda 2063. Fifth, there is an urgent need to activate peace and security initiative, as well as mediations that are facing now financing challenges. Sustainable peace demand a genuine commitment to ensuring permanent, flexible, sustainable, and predictable financing for this peace initiative, as well as for development strategies, including through the international financial institutions. Mr. President, given that poverty rates are 3 times higher in conflict-affected countries than in stable ones, according to the 2024 Multidimensional Poverty Index, Algeria has always attached utmost importance to security and development as essential pillars for its regional action, particularly in Africa. My country has developed lately major structural projects such as the Trans-Saharan Highway, the Saharan Fiber Optics Project, and the Trans-Saharan Gas Pipeline. Additionally, we have established a National Agency for International Cooperation for Solidarity and Development with a budget of $1 billion. This to support African countries in their development efforts. To conclude, Mr. President, Algeria remains committed to working in collaboration with all international partners to address the root causes of conflicts and to maintain international peace and security. Today, as we approach the 80th anniversary of the signing of the UN Charter, we reaffirm our commitment to multilateral action for peace, not as an option, but as a genuine commitment for sustainable peace and development in the world. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Algeria for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of China.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate Guyana for its initiative to hold this open debate on the theme of poverty, underdevelopment, and conflict, implications for the maintenance of international peace and security. I welcome Your Excellency Foreign Minister to New York to preside over this meeting. I thank Secretary General Guterres, Assistant Secretary General Vignarata, and Chairperson Yusuf for their briefings. Being the common aspiration of the people of all countries, peace and development are closely interlinked and complement and reinforce each other. Poverty and underdevelopment are major root causes of conflict. Many hotspot issues remain long unresolved and require comprehensive solutions from the perspective of development. To this end, I wish to share a few observations. We need to help developing countries leap across the development gaps. At present, progress in the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development is far behind expectations. Years of achievement in poverty reduction have been gained and lost. Challenges such as food and energy insecurity are interwoven and overlapping, and the global development deficit is further expanding. The international community should adhere to the notion of people-centeredness, work to bring the development agenda back to the center of the international agenda, put resources on a priority basis into key areas such as poverty reduction, education, employment, and capacity building, and strive to leave no country and no individual behind. We need to respect the development path independently chosen by every country. Countries differ in their histories, cultures, social systems, and levels of socio-economic development. We need to respect the right of the people of all countries to independently choose their development paths and oppose foreign interference and the imposition of one's own will upon others. We need to uphold the international rule of law, ensure effective implementation of international law, and oppose double standards. On hotspot issues, we should respect the merits of the matter, uphold fairness and justice, and support countries of the regions in finding ways to diffuse tensions and conflict, instead of provoking tensions and creating confrontation. We need to expand global partnerships for development. Developed countries should earnestly fulfill their ODA commitments and step up financial and technical support for developing countries, and in particular, vulnerable countries. so as to fulfill the role of North-South cooperation as the main channel. Developing countries need to actively engage in South-South cooperation and achieve strength through unity. China supports the UN in playing a central coordinating role in international development cooperation and encourages UN agencies and relevant international organizations to leverage their own strengths, step up complementarity and coordination, and form synergies for development. We need to work to improve global governance. We need to follow the principles of extensive consultation, joint contribution, and shared benefits, jointly respond to global challenges, and promote the common development of all countries. We need to advance reform of the international financial architecture to better reflect the changes in the world's economic landscape and to increase the representation and voice of developing countries. Countries should advocate universally beneficial and inclusive economic globalization, jointly uphold the WTO-centered and rules-based multilateral trading system, build an open world economy, oppose unilateralism, protectionism, and putting one's own interests above the interests of others. We need to attach importance to peace building. In post-conflict countries, peace building is a key aspect of conflict prevention. The international community needs to support the governments of the countries concerned in playing a leading role and help the countries concerned improve their governance systems, enhance governance capabilities, promote inclusive development, and advance reconstruction in all sectors so that the people will enjoy the development dividends at an early date and the outcomes of peace will be consolidated. China will participate constructively in this year's UN Peacebuilding Architecture Review and promote a better role of the peacebuilding architecture. President, China has always been a builder of world peace, a contributor to global development, and a defender of the international order. We put forth the Global Security Initiative, advocating the vision of common, comprehensive, cooperative, and sustainable security, and offering China's solution for the political settlement of hotspot issues. We are actively engaged in the Global Development Clause, working to implement Global Development Initiative, and engaging in high-quality Belt and Road cooperation with all countries for the common development of all. We are committed to high-standard opening up. We have fully opened the manufacturing sector to foreign investment and extend zero-tariff treatment to all African countries and LDCs that have established diplomatic ties with us. China is building a great modern socialist country in all respects and advancing the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation on all fronts through Chinese modernization. China has successfully blazed a modernization path suited to its national conditions. With our success, we have given other developing countries greater confidence in pursuing modernization and brought extensive opportunities for the modernization of all countries in the world. We stand ready to work with the international community in the tireless efforts to build a world of peaceful development, mutually beneficial cooperation, and common prosperity. I thank you, President.
I thank the representative of China for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Sierra Leone.
Mr. President, I thank and I welcome you, the Honorable Hugh Hilton Todd, Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, to the Security Council, and I commend Guyana for convening this timely open debate. We are grateful for the insightful briefings by His Excellency Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, Ms. Kani Wignaraja, Assistant Secretary General and Regional Director of UNDP, and His Excellency Mr. Mahmoud Ali Yusuf, Chairperson of the African Union Commission. Sierra Leone warmly congratulates Chairperson Yusuf on his election and assumption of office and extend best wishes in his important role. Mr. President, we meet at a time of escalating global insecurity, with conflicts across the world that continue to destabilize regions, divert scarce resources from development to security expenditures, and entrenched poverty. As Secretary General Guterres once previously observed, and I quote, "The human cost of this conflict is heartbreaking, and the cost to development is incalculable," end of quote. The result is ballooning military budgets at the expense of investment in education, healthcare, and sustainable development. This trend erodes the foundation upon which the United Nations was built, the inseparable pursuit of peace and development, as well as the promotion of human rights. Equal to the context of multiplying crisis and militarization is the troubling erosion of the rules-based international legal order that was intended to safeguard peace and constrain the abuse of power. The rules-based system embodied in the UN Charter is increasingly undermined with unilateral uses of force, violations of sovereignty, eroding confidence in international law. Small states, developing countries, most especially least developed countries like Sierra Leone, depend on the integrity of this system. We therefore call on all UN member states to recommit to the principles of the Charter and to strengthen accountability so that no state is above the law. The promise of the post-war legal order, sovereign equality, non-interference, and sustainable development are being undermined by the selective application and erosion of international law. The very rules that should constrain the exercise of power by the most powerful state have often been disregarded, allowing interventions, economic coercion, and structural economic arrangements that deepen poverty in the global south. Mr. President, there is irrefutable evidence that poverty and underdevelopment are not merely consequences of conflict, but often root causes. Where people are denied opportunity, dignity, and basic services, instability festers. Conversely, sustainable peace requires a solid foundation of inclusive development, equitable governance, and resilient institutions. As Security Council Resolution 2282 reminds us, and I quote, "A comprehensive approach to sustainable peace, particularly through the prevention of conflict and addressing its root causes, including poverty eradication, sustainable development, and national reconciliation," end of quote, is essential. As a matter of fact, the historical and structural inequalities embedded in the international order, established in the aftermath of the Second World War, primarily to serve the interests of the industrialized powers, continue to have profound consequences. The United Nations and this Security Council, the Bretton Woods institutions, and the global trading system were created without meaningful participation from colonized regions. 8 decades on, these imbalances persist. Africa in particular remains underrepresented in global decision-making, with decisions that significantly impact the continent still often taken without its representative voice at the table. Sierra Leone therefore joins the global consensus on the urgent need for comprehensive reform of the Security Council and international financial institutions, as recognized in the Pact for the Future. The Pact reflects the most progressive and concrete commitment to Security Council reform since the 1960s, and the most detailed arrangement ever at the United Nations on the need for reform of the international financial architecture. Reform is essential to ensure global governance that is just, inclusive, and fit for purpose. Sierra Leone supports the call for greater coordination between the Security Council, the Peace-Building Commission, ECOSOC, and the General Assembly. We believe that synergies across the UN system and stronger partnerships with regional organizations such as the African Union, the Caribbean Community, ASEAN, and the European Union are essential for addressing the deep-rooted causes of conflict. Mr. President, poverty and conflict, in particular in Africa, are often exacerbated by external competition for natural resources. The intensifying race for the critical minerals and rare earth elements essential for the green and digital transitions has become a significant driver of instability and conflict. External actors, including non-state actors, have in some cases fueled tensions, prolonged armed conflicts, and undermined national sovereignty. As our lived experience demonstrates, illicit resource exploitation and violence are devastatingly linked. We therefore call for a stronger international framework and certification mechanism on natural resource governance to promote responsible sourcing, break the resource conflict link, and ensure natural wealth supports sustainable development. We also encourage stronger partnerships with the IFIs, recognizing that economic transformation is a cornerstone of peace. Mr. President, poverty eradication and sustainable development are central to conflict prevention. In debates on the new agenda for peace, we have underscored in this chamber the need for comprehensive, inclusive, and people-centered national prevention strategies aligned with the sustainable development. As we approach the 80th anniversary of the United Nations, we're reminded that the vision of the Charter was not merely to end wars, but to build the conditions for lasting peace through the economic and social advancement of all peoples. Against this backdrop, Sierra Leone wishes to highlight 4 points. First, a call for inclusive global governance. A rules-based system that is inclusive, representative, and responsive is vital. A participatory and inclusive approach to sustainable development must be employed, with women and youth as major constituents. Africa and the Global South must have a greater voice in decision-making to harness opportunities for investment, partnerships, and economic transformation. Reform of the Security Council and global financial institutions is essential to ensure equity and effectiveness. Second, mainstreaming integrated strategies for peace and development. The UN must promote a coherent approach that recognizes the interconnectedness of peace building, development, and humanitarian action. We emphasize the critical role of resident coordinators, the convening role of the Peace Building Commission, and the contributions of UN country teams in delivering effective, context-specific strategies. Third, mandating outcome-oriented peace operations. UN peace operations must be underpinned by long-term investment in reconciliation, recovery, and development. Peace operations should support nationally led strategies for poverty reduction, youth and employment, governance reform, and women empowerment, particularly in post-conflict settings. Fourth, consistent application of international law and economic reform to build trust. The international community must pursue fair trade, equitable financing, and debt reform. As we have heard and briefed, every investment in prevention saves up to 100 in response. Reforming the global economic system will help developing countries achieve the SDGs and build resilience to economic drivers of conflict. In Africa, we have seen how underdevelopment fuels vulnerability to conflict, but we have also witnessed the power of community-led peace building and regional partnerships. As we've heard from Chairperson Yusuf, the AU Silencing the Gun Initiative, Agenda 2063, the African Continental Free Trade Area, and the African Green Mineral Strategy are critical strategies that deserve full implementation and support. In closing, Mr. President, it is important to reaffirm that peace is not merely the absence of war, but the presence of justice, equity, and opportunity. Let us match our words with action by investing in sustainable development, upholding international law, and reforming global governance structures to ensure peace, development, and human rights for all. It starts with one word: ceasefire. Ceasefire in Sudan, ceasefire in Gaza, ceasefire in Myanmar, ceasefire in Ukraine, and ceasefire between Israel and Iran. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Sierra Leone for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of France.
Merci,
Thank
Monsieur
you,
le Président.
Mr. President.
Monsieur le Président, je
Mr.
remercie le
President, I wish
Guyana
to take
d'avoir
this
pris
opportunity to
l'initiative de
thank
cette
Guyana for
réunion à
having taken the
l'occasion de sa
initiative to
présidence du
convene this
Conseil
meeting
de
during its
sécurité,
presidency of the
dont je
Security
le
Council.
félicite.
And I commend and congratulate Guyana. This meeting is based on a critical issue that of the nexus between sustainable development and peace. I welcome your presence, Foreign Minister of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana. I thank the UN Secretary General, as well as the Chairperson of the EU Commission and the Assistant Secretary General and Regional Director of the UN Development Program for their statements. As the deadline nears, Agenda 2030 is imperiled, and our collective ability to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals set in 2015 appear to be increasingly remote. At the same time, peace is jeopardized in many parts of the world, and the numbers of armed conflicts are growing. This is the situation that should be of concern to the Security Council in the name of the principal responsibility incumbent upon the Council vis-à-vis the maintenance of international peace and security. A mobilization to build sustainable development needs to include the mobilization of this Council in order to extinguish conflict. We call for unity around the following points. First and foremost, the Council needs to be steadfastly mobilized to building peace by seeking to achieve conditions for development. In many countries, persistent conflict obstructs development, erodes institutions, destroys public services, and fuels poverty. The impact disproportionately afflicts women, children, and the most vulnerable. The exacerbation of humanitarian crises throughout the world is alarming and devastating. Sudan is a stark example of a country with tremendous potential whose development has been made impossible by a devastating war, devastating for Sudan and neighboring countries. Those supporting the belligerents continue to prolong this war, and people there pay the price. The Council needs to act, and obstruction of Council action for political advancement and purposes means those who do so bear responsibility here. Sudan is undergoing a historic transition. For this to be a success, economic recovery is a priority. In the absence of prospects for development, there is a significant risk of providing fertile ground for the resumption of violence and terrorism. And there is a need to facilitate development. The Council and the international community therefore have a responsibility to support the Syrian transition in all of its dimensions. This is the thrust of the decision of the EU to lift the economic sanctions that were weighing upon Syria. It is also incumbent upon the Council to act to end the crisis in Burma, where violence against civilians has been ongoing for more than 4 years. The Council needs to support ASEAN's efforts to establish inclusive dialogue to facilitate a political solution to the conflict in accordance with the will and interests of the people of Burma, and to place the country on the path towards sustainable development. The lifting of obstacles to humanitarian access posed by the military regime is vital to meet the conditions for dialogue. There are many other examples that come to mind: the tragedy in Gaza, in Ukraine, and we have the collective response of the Security Council needs to include surmounting of the blockages in order to build peace in accordance with international law and the Charter of the United Nations. We need to tailor our responses to the joint needs of peacekeeping and sustainable development, combating impunity, restoration of human development-based policies. There's a critical need to leverage tools which reflect the diversity of factors of fragility, including poverty, climate change, poor governance, inequality, and the list goes on. Peacekeeping operations are geared towards supporting development. The PBC has also promoted a cross-cutting approach, bringing together security, development, and human rights defense. Speakers have stressed the efforts that need to be buttressed by the entire UN system, as well as regional organizations, in order to prevent conflict and to build and create an environment for peace and sustainable development. France defends an ambitious, bold, multilateral agenda for peace and prosperity of peoples on the planet. We're committed
committed to the implementation of Agenda 2030, as well as the Sustainable Development Goals. The organization of the 31st Conference on Oceans in Nice was the most recent example of this. And this ambition will be seen in a few days in Seville, in a few months in Doha and Belém, and other international fora where we will mobilize the community at the highest level, the coalition of the Pact for the Prosperity of the Peoples of the Planet, for no country to have to be faced with the choice between combating poverty and preserving the planet. This comprehensive and integrated approach is rooted in international law, rooted in the Charter of the United Nations and in our multilateral commitments, including the Paris Agreement, the High Seas Treaty, which we will hope to see enter into force. This will be important for building peace and lasting development. Thank you.
I thank the representative of France for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Denmark.
Thank you, Mr. President. And let me begin also by thanking Guyana and you, Foreign Minister Todd, for convening today's debate on this critical topic and for your efforts to bring peace, security, and development nexus to the forefront of our work. Let me also thank the Secretary General and the distinguished briefers for their interventions. Mr. President, 80 years since the founding of this organization, our world is in a state of disarray. Violent conflicts are raging, and the ideals upon which the UN was founded are strained on a near daily basis. In this context, today's debate is a welcome reminder of the need for the international community, including this Council, to refocus our attention, to place conflict prevention and sustainable development at the heart of our policies. Allow me to make 3 points. First, around this table, we are frequently reminded of the immediate consequences of war. Yet, each conflict also leaves a lasting legacy of inequality, injustice, and impoverished communities. This Council needs to place these people at the heart of our discussions. Often these are young people. They're the ones bearing the brunt of these interconnected crises and the generational consequences of conflict, inequalities, and climate change. Around the world, they face a range of challenges, from stigmatization to political exclusion to economic insecurity. But young people are not problems to be solved. They're peace builders, educators, and leaders. Investing in their rights and opportunities today will empower them to lead the peace they will ultimately inherit tomorrow. They'll pay peace dividends for generations to come. This is not an add-on, but our mandate at its core. Second, Mr. President, if we treat conflict as an event, we'll always arrive too late. Conflict prevention must become an integrated part of this Council's work. This makes sense politically, morally, and financially. Prevention saves both lives and money. The longer we take to invest in prevention, the more complex challenges grow, the deeper inequality is cut, and the more likely violence is to arise. For Denmark, this is not abstract. Human rights, youth empowerment, and gender equality are goals in their own rights, but they are also political imperatives for sustainable peace and development. For more than 4 decades, we have upheld our ODA commitment of 0.7% of GNI. We continue to dedicate part of that to peace and stabilization. We do so in the firm belief that peace and sustainable development are closely linked. We'll continue our strong commitment to all 3 pillars of the UN system: peace and security, development, and human rights. Mr. President, my 3rd point. We already have the tools at our disposal. We have the agendas and the frameworks to guide our actions. What is needed now is to adapt them to today's complex realities. For example, we recognize the Peacebuilding Commission as a critical platform to support national peacebuilding priorities, spot emerging risks, and early warning signs. The ongoing review of the UN peacebuilding architecture is a chance to refocus our efforts towards exclusive local impact and nationally led prevention. It is a chance to mobilize the full force of the UN system and beyond. In addition, the review of all forms of peace operations represent an opportunity to adapt this indispensable tool to ever-changing realities on the ground. Also, the 25th anniversary of the Women, Peace and Security Agenda and the 10th anniversary of the Youth Peace and Security Agenda are important occasions to recommit to shifting power for peace. Finally, we need to expand our joint efforts with regional organizations and financial institutions They are critical partners of countries in their efforts to sustain peace. They are also critical partners of this Council. Mr. President, in closing, just as conflict starts well before the pulling of a trigger, peace does not end with the signing of a deal. Sustained efforts are needed to avoid relapse into violent conflict. We know that the road to lasting peace is long. It takes time and it takes commitment to address its drivers and enablers of conflict. It takes partnership, investment, and a willingness to adapt. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Denmark for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Pakistan.
Mr. President, Foreign Minister, the Pakistan delegation would like to thank the presidency of Guyana for its leadership and for convening this important debate. We appreciate the Secretary General for his compelling statement this morning, setting the stage for this debate. Let me also thank ASG Kani Vinyaraja and Mr. Mahmoud Ali Yusuf, Chairperson, African Union Commission, for their insightful briefings. The theme before us today captures a fundamental truth. Poverty, development, and peace are inextricably linked. The eradication of poverty remains one of the biggest global challenges and a prerequisite for sustainable development. Without development, peace cannot endure. And without peace, development cannot take root. And we must not forget the crucial third pillar, human rights. As former UN Secretary General Kofi Annan aptly said, we will not enjoy development without security. We will not enjoy security without development, and neither without respect for human rights. Mr. President, poverty, exclusion, inequality, and the denial of fundamental rights are not just development concerns. They are among the deep-rooted structural causes of conflict. Without addressing these underlying drivers, peace efforts will remain incomplete, fragile, and short-lived. The world today is witnessing growing insecurity, deepening inequalities, and reversals in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. The burden of these challenges falls disproportionately on the Global South. Rising debt, climate stress, hunger, and deprivation continue to fuel instability in many parts of the world. The Security Council has long acknowledged the peace-development nexus. It must continue to ensure that this understanding is integrated more fully into its work, and we need to operationalize this principle in practice. I would like to offer 4 points in this regard. First, the Council must address structural injustices that perpetuate conflict, including unresolved and long-running situations of foreign occupation, systemic discrimination, and the denial of right to self-determination. A principled and consistent application of international law, the UN Charter, and relevant Security Council resolutions is essential to peace, justice, and stability. Second, sustaining peace requires more than military responses. It demands a comprehensive, system-wide approach throughout the peace continuum. We must enhance the Council's role in conflict prevention by strengthening preventive diplomacy and promoting the peaceful settlement of disputes. And our response to intrastate situations or complex crises should continue to embed development considerations into peacekeeping and peace-building efforts. This requires stronger collaboration with the ECOSOC, the Peace-Building Commission, and the UN development actors in design and implementation of mandates. The ongoing peace-building architecture review is a vital opportunity in this regard. Third, responses must be tailored to specific contexts. There is no one-size-fits-all solution. National governments have the primary responsibility for peace and development. They must lead efforts to combat poverty and underdevelopment as part of their conflict prevention strategies. And the international community and this Council must support their efforts by aligning mandates with prevention goals and through timely, coherent, and sustained engagement, especially in countries emerging from conflict. Fourth, The Council should deepen partnerships with regional and sub-regional organizations such as the African Union, the European Union, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, ASEAN, and others, who often act as first responders in preventing and resolving conflict. Their voices and insights must be institutionally integrated into Council's deliberations. We look forward to also advancing some of these objectives during Pakistan's presidency of the Council next month. Mr. President, as the Secretary General emphasized, prevention is the best cure, and we have often said development is the best means of conflict prevention. We cannot speak of lasting peace without addressing the structural conditions that undermine development. Yet, developing countries are being held back by unjust global economic structures. They are burdened by unsustainable debt, hunger, and worsening climate shocks. Despite their resources, despite their wealth, they are often at the receiving end of the scramble for and exploitation of natural resources that favor the developed world. Many are trapped in unfair and inequitable global systems that perpetuate poverty and underdevelopment. The world needs 4.2 trillion annually to meet the SDGs. This is achievable if there is political will. The steps would include additional issuance of and further rechanneling of special drawing rights, recapitalization and strengthening of multilateral development banks, fulfillment of ODA and climate finance commitments, equitable and timely resolution of debt crisis, fair, development-oriented trade policies, and just international taxation systems. The upcoming Financing for Development Conference, FFD4, is a critical moment to take bold, practical actions for a meaningful way forward, to keep the development engine strong and running, as the Secretary General said this morning. Mr. President, as we approach the 80th anniversary of the UN Charter, we must renew our collective commitment to its founding vision, a world built on peace, development, and human dignity. The Secretary General's UN 80 initiative offers another opportunity to build on earlier reforms, advance the implementation of the Pact for the Future, reinvigorate multilateralism, and make the UN more effective, inclusive, and responsive. We must not allow poverty to continue sowing the seeds of conflict. Building lasting peace means building societies where every individual has the opportunity to live in dignity, free from want and fear. We must set aside the geopolitical divisions, not only to arrest the downward slide, but also to reverse this trend, to join hands and pool our collective resources for sustainable peace and development. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Pakistan for the statement, and I will give the floor to the representative of Greece.
Thank you, Mr. President. At the outset, allow me to commend the Cooperative Republic of Guyana and Your Excellency, Mr. Foreign Minister, for convening this timely and highly relevant debate. I also like to thank the Secretary General and distinguished briefers for the insightful remarks. Mr. President, as we mark the 80th anniversary of the signing of the United Nations Charter, we are reminded that our shared vision of international peace and sustainable development founded on respect for international law and international humanitarian law remains unfinished. Around the world, conflicts continue to erase years of progress, while structural conditions such as inequality, exclusion, and weak governments undermine the foundation of stability. These overlapping crises have hit low-income countries the hardest. Extreme poverty has become increasingly concentrated in sub-Saharan Africa and places affected by conflict and fragility, according to World Bank's data. To achieve stronger, inclusive economies and prosperous society, our policy decisions need to be guided by SDG 1, ending poverty in all its forms everywhere. Addressing the root causes of conflict by reducing poverty and inequality is one of the central pillars of Greece's commitment for global peace. Specifically, Greece has recently funded World Food Programme project for the restoration of port of Benghazi in Libya, which serves as a critical entry port for food and humanitarian aid to the wider region of North Africa and the Sahel, and WHO rehabilitation project for the Al-Kahir hospital in Gaza, a critical referral point for displaced population. Mr. President, Greece firmly believes that poverty and underdevelopment are not just development concerns, they are fundamental threats to peace and security. As outlined in the Secretary-General's new Agenda for Peace, conflict prevention must be rooted in inclusive development, social cohesion, and institutional resilience. In this context, allow me to highlight 4 key areas of focus. First, we need to strengthen and mainstream existing approaches to address the root causes of conflict, such as poverty, food insecurity, absence of rule of law, and violent extremism. Closely interlinked, our humanitarian development and peace efforts is key to bring more efficient on the ground in conformity with the triple humanitarian development peace nexus. In this respect, the Peacebuilding Commission is ideally placed to raise awareness of regional efforts, local community expertise, as well as the cross-border dimensions of conflict. We welcome its advice, which is not only valuable to us in the context of this meeting, but can also guide us in our future endeavors. For this reason, Greece, during this year's Peacebuilding Architecture Review, reiterated strong support for expanding PBC's roles in regional setting and cross-cutting areas, including human rights and climate-related peace and security risks. In this respect, cooperation with the EU Commission remains crucial. Second, peace must be inclusive to be durable, in line with SDG 16 and conflict and corruption. Greece champions participatory and representative governance at all levels. The full and meaningful participation of women, youth, and marginalized communities is indispensable for creating resilient institutions and achieving long-term development goals. Third, we call for greater investment in conflict prevention and peace building. We strongly encourage all member states to agree on raising assessed contribution to meet conflict-affected countries, rising the requirements for support for the Peace Building Fund. Additionally, formalizing PBC relations with international financial institutions and regional development banks, and strengthen its cooperation with ECOSOC can better operationalize its development impact on the ground. Fourth, Greece remains committed to the collective aspiration to enhance the conservation and sustainable use of oceans and their resources by implementing international law as reflected in the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, in line with Target 14C of the SDGs. Mr. President, in closing, let me stress that Greece supports a rule-based global order with multilateralism at its key principle and the United Nations at its core. We remain committed to multilateralism and to a UN system that is more responsive, inclusive, and aligned with the real needs of those most at risk. Let us seize this milestone year, UN80, as a moment to recommit to a vision of peace anchored in dignity, equity, and opportunity for all. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Greece for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Mr. President, Mr. Minister, we welcome you as President of the Security Council. The Guyanan presidency proposed a discussion today of a complicated and a highly inconvenient matter for many at the UN Security Council, that is the link between poverty and conflicts. We thank the UN Secretary General for his briefing, as well as the Assistant Secretary General, Madam Raja, and Mr. Yusuf for their briefings. Mr. President, as is the case in many other similar situations when the Council raises matters peripheral to its mandate, to the maintenance of international peace and security, and when there's a clear lack of consensus, and this has been confirmed by the situation with the initiative to reach agreement on a Council product, we nevertheless stand ready to contribute to the discussion. However, the greatest challenge is to find consensus regarding the root causes of the challenges under discussion. The issue of countering poverty without being fused with human rights, gender, democracy, and climate change-related challenges, this is an issue which remains a priority task for the socioeconomic pillar of the United Nations, the top priority under the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. According to paragraph 35 of this agenda, peace and security will be at risk where poverty is not surmounted and sustainable development has not taken root. At the same time, acute poverty as a factor which creates fertile ground for the outbreak of new hotbeds of tension, this is neither the sole nor even the main reason here. It is evident to all that there are countries on the map with low development levels who are not mired in the quagmire of conflict. On the contrary, there is a need to recognize the fact that the real root causes for conflict remain external intervention, domestic affairs of states, and the geopolitical ambitions of certain groups of countries who are striving to expand their zones of influence at the expense of others and are contriving to buttress their dwindling domination. The starkest manifestation of this is evident in the legacy of colonialism and neo-colonialist practices, as well as with the aggressive practice being carried out by foreign colonial powers reigning in their former protégés by siphoning off their resources and imposing unilateral coercive measures. This is worth dwelling on in greater detail. The 16 June general debate and adoption of a resolution proclaiming the International Day Against UCMs showed that illegitimate unilateral sanctions are categorically qualified by developing countries and the expert community as a cudgel to contrive to entrench sovereign states in a state of poverty, to generate internal social tensions, as well as regional destabilization. The lifting of these sanctions and the removal of such countries as, for example, Cuba from discriminatory political lists would be the best example of combating poverty and conflict prevention. Issues related to external debt are also being exacerbated. Since 2011, the number of states with high debt levels rose from 22 to 59. African countries' external debt has greater than 24.5% of their aggregate GDP, and at the same time in many states in the region, this figure is significantly greater, up to 60%, and expenditures for servicing these debts are outstripping expenditures for education and medicine. The highest percentage rates for debt obligation servicing apply precisely for the poorest countries of Africa, Latin America, Asia, and the Pacific Ocean. Thus, in accordance with the so-called rules-based order, which is championed by the West, this so-called rules-based order, which was mentioned today, the Global South falls into the trap of cyclical debt accumulation and is transformed into a bargaining chip for Western states' geopolitical agendas. There's an alarming situation experienced by those countries also who are not being targeted by sanctions or are mired in a debt trap. For example, since 2024, we have seen a sustained trend of the reduction of external assistance by major donors. According to OECD assessments, overall official development assistance levels in 2024 fell by 7.1%. According to forecasts this year, 2025, this figure may fall by yet another 9 to 17%. Appeals from the UN Development and Humanitarian Assistance Agencies are only 10 to 20% met, and donors presently have priorities other than helping countries in need. They are reorienting their budgets to militarize their economies and to finance the weapons-related demands of other states. Thereby, they are merely fanning the flames of current conflicts instead of honoring their obligations and preventing those conflicts, including by combating poverty in the least developed countries. Blatant examples of external players dragging developing countries into a quagmire of poverty and instability is seen in specific country and regional situations. For example, the situation in Afghanistan. Afghanistan had for years been dependent on international assistance due to the NATO troops' presence over the span of 2 decades, and subsequently was utterly financially depleted, targeted by unilateral sanctions and on the brink of humanitarian and economic collapse. Sahel-Sahara countries, in addition to illegitimate unilateral restrictions, are encountering catastrophic underfinancing of the humanitarian appeal. 9%, that is the amount from the overall humanitarian needs, which the people of the region buffeted attacked by terrorism as a result of NATO's armed incursion in Libya and has been receiving. The Council's agenda is replete with such examples. To conclude, we once again wish to draw the Council members' attention to the fact that it would be more advisable to consider questions being raised today at universal and specialized United Nations formats and mechanisms. These include the General Assembly, as well as the leading bodies of the United Nations development system, including the executive funds and programs, in order not to jeopardize the principle of the division of labor between the principal organs of the United Nations. The Security Council could turn to them, however, merely in the context of the maintenance of international peace and security and for specific country situations. The body that holds a unique position at the intersection of peace and development issues, the PBC, also is positioned to contribute to enhancement of coordination of efforts where the voices of host state governments are given pride of place. At the same time, we believe that in order to implement Agenda 2030, there's a need to revert back to dialogue among states based on sovereign equality of all of the members of the international community and their right to choose their economic models, as well as in accordance with the principle of indivisibility of security. The fight against poverty needs to remain the leading, unchanged priority for our collective action. Success will be determined by whether we are capable to usher in a transition away from past colonialist practices towards a future of mutually respectful relations. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Panama.
Muchas gracias, señor
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Panama would like to thank Guyana for convening this open debate, which addresses a complex and profound issue, but one which is of great international relevance. We also welcome His Excellency Hugh Hilton Todd, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana. Also, we would like to acknowledge the valuable contribution of Mr. Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, Madam Kani Wignaraja, Assistant Secretary General and Regional Director for Asia and the Pacific, and the representative of the African Union, Mr. Mohamed Ali Yusuf. Mr. President, we live in a world where, as was reaffirmed by the vast majority of member states in the Pact for the Future, where peace, international security, sustainable development and human rights are inextricably linked. For Panama, conflict and its most direct manifestations of violence undoubtedly worsen poverty and the challenges to sustainable development. But we also recognize that structural conditions such as inequality, colonial legacy, external interference can provide fertile ground for instability without being direct causes of conflict. In this regard, it's essential that we highlight that more than poverty in itself, it's the institutional weakness which very often makes social tensions become organized violence. States where institutions are challenges, where justice, security, and basic services are inaccessible or unequal, are particularly vulnerable to cycles of violence and conflict. Unfortunately, this reality can be seen clearly in the case of our brotherly nation of Haiti. Today, it's facing a multidimensional crisis that goes beyond the humanitarian issues. More than 85% of its capital is under the control of armed gangs. Murders, sexual violence, and systematic violations of human rights have increased, and 1.3 million people are internally displaced. To this data, we have to add the weak government that's made it possible for fear and exclusion to have become instrumentalized by violent actors in order to forcefully recruit children and young people. It's not just an issue of poverty, it's a collapse of the social contract. We are seeing similar situations in the Sahel, in Central Africa and very many other regions where things like climate change, food insecurity, restrictions on the rights of women, ethnic discrimination amongst other things are leading to conditions of instability, and those effects directly affect the civilian population. The pattern is repeated according to the multidimensional poverty index of the United Nations Development Programme in 2024. More than 1.1 billion people are living in acute poverty, and almost half of them, in almost half of those cases, these are conflict situations. Additionally, there are very many internally displaced due to violence, and the majority of those were women and girls, according to UNHCR figures. And the same report says that 455 million people living in poverty are specifically in conflict contexts. President, Panama firmly believes that international action must be focused not only in mitigating the effects of conflicts, but also in strengthening the institutional capacities of states to prevent these situations, strengthening the rule of law, fair access to public services, and the promotion of legitimate institutions that are transparent and effective are strategic investments for lasting peace. And just as violence, poverty, and social fragmentation tend to feed into each other, the Sustainable Development Goals show that improvements in education, health, employment, and governance can generate a positive impact, strengthening social cohesion and preventing a resurgence of tensions. In this global challenging environment, Panama stresses the need for this Council to broaden its view and not just look at immediate security situations. We need to recognize that current situations are complex, interdependent, and multidimensional. Responding to those with a comprehensive vision that includes strengthening institutions will mean that we will be better prepared to build genuine and sustainable peace. Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of Panama for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Slovenia.
Thank you, President, and thank you to the Guyanese presidency for organizing this open debate. I also wish to join others in thanking Secretary General Guterres, UNDP Assistant Secretary General Wagneraya, and the EU Commission Chairperson Youssef for their valuable briefings. Mr. President, the UN Charter entrusts Security Council with a broad mandate to maintain international peace and security. This responsibility extends beyond conflict resolution. It also places upon this body a crucial role in early warning and conflict prevention. While other UN bodies, such as ECOSOC or the Peacebuilding Commission, might be better positioned to develop concrete solutions for complex and mutually reinforcing relationships between poverty, underdevelopment, and conflict, debates such as today's can enhance the Security Council's ability to better fulfill its primary responsibility. As we walk to this chamber, the UNDP's headquarters across the street reminds us daily, quote, "There is no peace without development, and there is no development without peace," unquote. Although conflict is by no means exclusive to developing countries, numerous studies confirm that the risk for conflict is significantly higher in contexts marked by poverty, inequalities, weak governance, the erosion of trust in public institutions, deep economic challenges, and climate stress, among other contributing factors. Road to violence often begins long before the first bullets are fired. Mr. President, today I'd like to offer 3 considerations for the Council. First, investments in development and resilience are investments in peace and security, and evidence proves they are cost-effective. Achieving the 2030 Agenda remains the main instrument to address root causes of poverty, conflict, and instability. Sustainable development, strong institutions, good governance based on the rule of law, respect and protection of human rights, as well as access to basic services such as water and sanitation, education and healthcare not only save lives, they also reduce the immense financial cost associated with post-conflict reconstruction. Prevention is the most efficient and cost-effective tool to guide fragile countries from conflict towards peace and resilience, enabling them to absorb, mitigate, and withstand shocks. This is a trade-off that decision makers cannot afford to ignore. Second, we believe in human-centered approach to security. Our responses must include climate adaptation, food security, sustainable development, and inclusive access to essential services, education, jobs, and economic opportunities. Investing in children's well-being and empowering women and youth are necessary and effective peace-building strategies. Education remains one of the most powerful tools to counter radicalization and prevent recruitment into armed groups. Ensuring access to education, especially for girls, is one of Slovenia's key priorities during our term on the executive board of UNICEF, and in 2024, Slovenia joined the School Meals Coalition, which aims to ensure that every child worldwide has a school meal by 2030. Also important is the aspect of human dignity. The full, equal, meaningful, and safe participation of all women, including those facing social and economic exclusion, has been shown to improve the effectiveness of conflict prevention, mediation efforts, and humanitarian response. Slovenia has placed the empowerment of women in the center of its development aid policies as the critical element to strengthen societal resilience and advancing sustainable development. Finally, without sustained efforts to build resilience, today's challenges will re-emerge tomorrow. Advancing the coherent implementation of the triple nexus remains critical to the effectiveness and sustainability of our collective response. The triple nexus approach must be operationalized in practice through integrated investments in basic social services, local governance, and social cohesion, alongside peacekeeping and peace-building efforts. As the member of the Security Council, ECOSOC, and the Peace-Building Commission, Slovenia remains committed to building bridges between these 3 bodies so that they could better address complex and multi-phase challenges that we're facing today. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Slovenia for the statement. I now give the floor to Ms. Maria Malmer Stenergard, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Sweden.
Thank you, President. I'm honored to make this statement on behalf of the Nordic countries, Denmark, Finland, Iceland, Norway, and my own country, Sweden. Last week, the Uppsala Conflict Data Program established that the number of armed conflicts in the world has reached a historic high. There are now 61 active conflicts. We firmly maintain that respect for international law is essential for peace, security, and development. In this chamber, we are often reminded of the direct casualties of war. However, the secondary effects of conflict and how they negatively impact development are less talked about. Armed conflict undermines health systems, leading to increased mortality. War disrupts education systems, with effects on future incomes. Conflict destroys infrastructure, impedes access to clean water and food, and damages the environment. Conflict results in forced displacement. We also have the invisible war wounds, the traumas and long-term effects on mental health, which can persist for generations. Poverty and underdevelopment can also drive instability. A combination of weak governance and marginalized communities often increases the risk of violence. President, to break today's vicious spiral of escalating armed conflict on the one hand and growing poverty and underdevelopment on the other, I want to focus on one aspect, the importance of empowering women and girls. Promoting gender equality is key to achieving peace, security, and development. This is not just a statement taken out of thin air. Studies show that women are more likely than men to invest their earnings in their families and communities. Investing in women is one of the smartest things to do to break the poverty trap. That includes ensuring their sexual and reproductive health and rights. GDP per capita would be almost 20% higher on average across countries if gender employment gaps were closed. We also know that women's political participation leads to more long-term peace and stability. Research shows that peace agreements with women signatories have higher rates of implementation and last longer. Yet women make up only 5% of the negotiators, 9% of the mediators, and 19% of the signatories. Given this and other evidence at hand, we conclude that it is unrealistic, even impossible, to expect peace, security, and development to happen unless we take gender equality more seriously. Therefore, we call on the Security Council to place women, peace, and security high on the agenda and encourage all member states to step up their efforts for gender equality. I thank you.
I thank Her Excellency, Ms. Donnergaard, for her statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency, Mr. Mario Ludvikin, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Uruguay.
Muchísimas gracias, señor
Thank
presidente.
you very much, Mr. President.
Uruguay agradece a la
Uruguay would like to
presidencia de
thank
nuestros
the
amigos de
presidency
Guyana
of our
por la
friends from
oportuna
Guyana for
convocatoria de este
the
debate
timely
abierto.
convening of this
Uruguay
open debate.
reafirma su compromiso con el
Uruguay
multilateralismo
reaffirms
como
its commitment to
herramienta
multilateralism as an
indispensable
indispensable
para
tool
abordar de forma
to
integrada los
comprehensively
desafíos de la
address
paz,
the challenges
la
of
seguridad y el
peace,
desarrollo. Al
security and
aproximarse
development.
los
As we
80 años
approach
de la
the
Carta de las
80th
Naciones
anniversary
Unidas,
of the
resulta
UN Charter,
ineludible
it's
renovar nuestro
imperative to
compromiso
renew our
colectivo
collective
con la
commitment
promoción de
to
entornos
promoting
estables,
stable,
resilientes y
resilient
equitativos,
and
para
equitable
lo cual debemos
environments.
abordar las causas
To do this, we must address
estructurales
the
de los
structural
conflictos
causes
como
of
la pobreza, la
conflict, such as
desigualdad y
poverty,
la degradación
inequality,
ambiental.
and
Estamos
environmental
convencidos que el Consejo de
degradation.
Seguridad
We are
puede
convinced that the
desempeñar un papel
Security
clave
Council can
en
play
esta
a key
discusión.
role in this
No puede haber
discussion.
paz duradera sin
There
desarrollo
can't be
sostenible,
lasting
ni
peace without
desarrollo sin
sustainable
paz, y eso lo
development, and
sabemos.
no development without
Gestionar
peace.
riesgos y construir resiliencia
Managing
exige
risks and
enfoques
building resistance
integrales
demands
que conecten la
comprehensive
seguridad con el
approaches that
desarrollo
connect
y los derechos
security
humanos,
with development and human
acompañada de una
rights,
arquitectura financiera
alongside
internacional
a
robusta,
robust,
más justa y
fairer,
equitativa.
and more equitable international
Estamos
financial
convencidos
architecture.
de que invertir en
We are
desarrollo
convinced that
sostenible es la vía
investing in
para
sustainable
erradicar la
development is the
pobreza
path to
y generar
eradicating poverty,
oportunidades económicas,
generating
fortalecer la
economic
gobernanza,
opportunities,
el
strengthening
contrato
governance
social
and the
y
social
reducir los
contract,
factores que
and
conducen a la
reducing the
violencia.
drivers of violence.
Los vínculos entre la pobreza, el
Links
subdesarrollo y el
between
conflicto
poverty, underdevelopment,
implica
and
una acción
conflict require
coherente y
coherent
coordinada.
and
En
coordinated
este marco,
action.
me
In this
gustaría
context,
destacar
I would
los
like to
siguientes
highlight
elementos.
the
Primero,
following points.
los datos demuestran que en el
Firstly,
contexto de
data
pobreza
shows that in
multidimensional,
context of
donde
multidimensional
convergen
poverty,
carencias en el
where
acceso
there
a
are
servicios
combined
básicos,
deficiencies
a la
in
educación,
access
al
to basic
empleo digno
services,
y al
education,
ejercicio pleno de
decent
los derechos,
employment, and the full
se
exercise of
debilita el
rights,
entramado social
the social
y se
fabric
amplifican las
weakens,
condiciones que
and the
alimentan
conditions
los
that
ciclos de
fuel
violencia.
cycles of violence are
Es
amplified.
fundamental que los
Therefore, it is
mecanismos de alerta
essential
temprana
that
del
the
Consejo
Security
integren
Council's early
variables
warning
estructurales
mechanisms integrate
como
structural
desigualdad territorial,
variables such
brechas
as
de género,
territorial
desempleo juvenil y
inequality,
debilidad
gender gaps,
institucional
or youth
para
unemployment
anticipar
and institutional
efectivamente
weakness
estas
in
tensiones.
order to effectively
Dos, la
anticipate
paz debe
tensions.
traducirse
Secondly,
en
peace must
oportunidades para
translate
quienes
into
viven
opportunities
múltiples
for those
privaciones,
living with
especialmente
multiple
niños, jóvenes y
deprivations,
mujeres
especially children,
en
youth
contextos
and
de
women in
post-conflicto.
post-conflict
El empleo digno, la
settings.
educación Decent work, education and economic inclusion must be at the heart of prevention strategies, as well as be part of the comprehensive frameworks for peace missions and international cooperation. In this sense, we reiterate the importance of reforming the international financial architecture to ensure mechanisms for debt restructuring and relief, investment attraction and developing financing. Thirdly, we believe that peace building and sustainable development must be anchored in context-sensitive diagnostics centered on communities, local ownership, understanding of social territorial dynamics, and the participation of youth and women are necessary conditions for the success of multilateral efforts aimed at conflict prevention and the building of resilience, in addition to strengthening the legitimacy of the processes and contributing to restoring the social fabric. And four, while the interdependence between security, development and human rights is widely recognized, a gap persists between discourse and action, with a concerning trend towards prioritizing military responses over comprehensive and preventive approaches. The Security Council needs mandates to integrate sustainable development, territorial equity and distributive justice. These are key dimensions for achieving lasting peace, including in the design and implementation of peacekeeping operations. I would like to mention that as a member of the PBC, we believe that this body can and should play an active role as a bridge between prevention, development and peace building, offering strategic advice based on the experiences of affected states. We should also strengthen the role of ECOSOC in monitoring development financing alongside the Security Council strategies in conflict or transition contexts, ensuring a coherent response that integrates always with the 2030 agenda. We need to focus on the early stages of a conflict cycle for prevention, address structural causes of conflicts, many of which are socio-economic in nature, and rely on strong investments in quality public services and economic opportunities. These are fundamental elements to providing responses that reinforce cohesion and restore the social contract. Uruguay is committed to working actively to ensure that the United Nations system evolves towards a more coherent, inclusive and preventive approach. Only through effective multilateralism centered on human rights can we move toward truly sustainable peace. And I think that's what we should be concentrating on in our work. Thank you.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Lubekin for his statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Tauhid Hussein, Advisor for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Interim Government of Bangladesh.
Thank you. Mr. President, Excellencies, I thank the Presidency of Guyana for organizing this timely and important debate. We live in a world where poverty, underdevelopment, and conflict all are interconnected. If we are to preserve international peace and security, addressing these challenges is not an option, it is an essential. In Bangladesh, we have always viewed young people as agents of positive change, from the historic language movement of 1952 to our liberation struggle, and most recently the student-led Monsoon Revolution. Our youth have consistently led the way in fighting against inequalities and injustice. We are also deeply aware of the consequences when young people are denied access to education and employment. Across regions and contexts, large segments of youth, when left behind, can become vulnerable to manipulation and violent ideologies that exploit identity and faith. Excellencies, this Council is well aware that protracted crises often emerge from systemic marginalization. For over 8 years, Bangladesh has been hosting 1.2 million Rohingya refugees who fled from their own country, Myanmar, due to persecution by the military regime. Our humanitarian act has put us in immense socio-economic and environmental challenges, and the situation is now posing new security risks. We call for renewed international attention and action to ensure their return with safety and rights. This is not only a matter of justice, but also vital for preventing a root cause of a potential instability in our region. Mr. President, the current development and security landscape are shaped by long-standing inequities, many of which are rooted in centuries of political subjugation and economic exploitation. Correcting these imbalances is our shared responsibility. In this context, we must aim for a future shaped by the bold aspiration of 3 zeros pronounced by Professor Yunus: zero poverty, zero unemployment, and net zero carbon emissions. These are not just development goals, they are foundational to lasting peace and stability. Realizing this vision will require an alignment of peace-building efforts with inclusive and forward-looking development strategies. Here, we see strong merit in closer coordination across the 3 pillars of the UN. It is imperative that this Council works closely with ECOSOC and Peace-Building Commission to ensure that peace-building strategies are in conformity with development realities. Instead of only investing in recovery, we must also build resilience. Let us enable people, especially the most vulnerable, and give them the opportunity to thrive. In doing so, we see the transformative potential of social business pioneered by Nobel laureate Professor Mohammad Yunus. By prioritizing people over profits, such enterprises boost inclusive growth and reduce grievances that would otherwise lead to unrest. We believe this approach offers valuable lessons worth replicating globally. Bangladesh remains committed to doing its part and to working alongside all concerned in pursuit of a more just, peaceful, and secure world. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Hussein for his statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Benedito dos Santos Freitas, Minister for Foreign Affairs and Cooperation of Timor-Leste.
Thank you, Mr. President. At the outset, we thank Guyana as the President of the UN Security Council for organizing this important high-level open debate. We wish to also thank you, His Excellency Mr. Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary General, for his comprehensive remarks, and we extend our gratitude to the Assistant Secretary General of the UNDP and the Chairperson of the African Union for their comprehensive briefings. Mr. President, esteemed members of the Security Council, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, it is a great honor for Timor-Leste to contribute to this debate on the poverty, underdevelopment, and conflict implications for international peace and security. Mr. President, Excellencies, poverty and underdevelopment are not merely social conditions. They are potent catalysts for instability. In fragile states, they exacerbate tensions both within and between communities. A lack of access to basic services, high unemployment rates, and pervasive marginalization create profound grievances that can readily escalate into violent confrontations, thereby undermining peace agreements and perpetuating cycles of instability. Furthermore, weak institutions often struggle to deliver governance, security, and justice impartially, transforming poverty and underdevelopment into both symptoms and primary drivers of conflict. As member of the G7+, a group of fragile and conflict-affected states, we possess first-hand experience of how deeply socioeconomic vulnerabilities shape peace-building efforts. Our insights we share today are drawn directly from our own journey from fragility to progress. After the restoration of independence in 2002, Timor-Leste faced devastated infrastructure, fragile institutions, and deep socioeconomic exclusion. This dire situation prompted us to fundamentally rethink our trajectory of nationhood in close collaboration with our international partners. Through sustained international partnership, inclusive politics, and targeted poverty reduction initiatives, we have achieved measurable progress. Through significant challenges undeniably remain. Through community-driven development programs and strategic rural infrastructure investments, the national poverty headcount ratio notably fell from
50.4% in 2007 to 41.8% in 2014. However, the triple shocks of the natural disasters, the COVID-19 pandemic, and political deadlock from 2017 to 2023 severely hamper our poverty alleviation efforts. The current government is diligently working to reverse these setbacks. To diversify our economy, the government established the Petroleum Fund in 2002. This fund has enabled significant investments across various sectors, including agriculture, small and medium enterprises, and nascent tourism. The Petroleum Fund's establishment also led to the dramatic expansion of electricity coverage from single-digit percentages at independence to 97% nationwide, and an impressive increase in life expectancy from 57 to 70 years over 2 decades. Critically, all our development and peace-building programs are fully integrated into the government's annual planning cycle and meticulously aligned under the Strategic Development Plan 2011 to 2030. This plan sets clear indicators and objectives with the overarching aim of achieving middle-income status by 2030. Despite these achievements, persistent challenges include low economic growth, rising unemployment, continued poverty, and underdeveloped infrastructure. To address this, the government empowers rural communities to manage small-scale infrastructure projects, ensuring their relevance, ownership, and long-term sustainability. Unconditional cash transfers for vulnerable households continue to reduce acute food insecurity and foster vital social cohesion. The government remains committed to strengthening public financial management and anti-corruption frameworks, thereby increasing transparency and accountability in the resource allocation. We have also launched public-private partnerships in agro-processing and fisheries, effectively connecting smallholder farmers to both domestic and export markets. Given the decline in foreign assistance, we urge the international community to consider the following recommendations. Revisit the current financial architecture, provide multi-year programmatic funding modalities specifically tailored to fragile contexts. This will empower governments to plan and implement long-term development strategies under national leadership. The transition from over-reliance on official development assistance to fostering genuine economic resilience must be actively pursued. Integrate rigorous conflict analysis. Ensure that all development and humanitarian operations include thorough conflict analysis to mitigate unintended tensions and amplify peace dividends. Support digital infrastructure. Promote mobile banking and e-governance solutions that can leapfrog traditional development barriers and generate much-needed youth employment. Leverage expertise and investment. Seek expertise and investment from emerging economies and responsible businesses to diversify economics, facilitate knowledge transfer, and create sustainable value chains. Excellencies, peace extends far beyond the mere absence of violence. It demands conditions that uphold human dignity, provide genuine opportunity, and instill hope. Poverty and underdevelopment fundamentally undermine these essential conditions and are potent fuels for instability. Therefore, the global commitment to peace and security is intrinsically inseparable from our collective efforts to eradicate poverty and promote inclusive development, especially in fragile states on the front lines of conflict. Timor-Leste reaffirms its unwavering dedication to this unified agenda and urges all partners to intensify collaboration and share responsibility in building a more just, peaceful, and prosperous world. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank His Excellency, Mr. Dos Santos Freitas, for his statement. I now give the floor to Her Excellency, Ms. Serap Gruller, Minister of State at the Federal Foreign Office of Germany.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am honored to take the floor on behalf of the new German government and would like to thank Guyana for today's important debate about the link between poverty, underdevelopment and conflict. This year, we celebrate the United Nations 80th anniversary. We must remember the three pillars of the United Nations, peace, development and human rights, are not standalone priorities. We must always keep in mind all the three pillars. And we must work to ensure a coherent approach across the United Nations systems with the aim of a safer, more prosperous world. Mr. President, Germany has long focused on stabilization and peace building across the world. Our experience confirms what many have said during today's debate. The root causes of conflict must be addressed. We need to focus on strong institutions, inclusive governance and dialogue. And most importantly, we must promote economic development. The Peacebuilding Commission and the Peacebuilding Fund are supporting countries in their nationally led efforts to build sustainable, lasting peace. Another great example of an inclusive approach is the Regional Stabilization Facility in the Lake Chad region, which Germany has supported for many years. Mr. President, as you have pointed out, addressing climate change must be a priority. Climate change undermines sustainable development. It makes communities vulnerable. It can lead to conflict. Germany has therefore set up a dedicated portfolio with climate-sensitive peace projects. The Security Council has recognized these links in several mission mandates. This was also underscored at the Peacekeeping Ministerial in Berlin on the 30th and 40th May of this year. We call on the members of the Security Council to continue this work, meeting the realities faced by many nations and people on the ground. At the same time, the entire United Nations systems must coordinate better to find solutions to the climate and development challenges. The UN Climate Security Mechanism is a perfect example of how to break down silos. Expertise must be combined across pillars. As long-time supporter and largest donor of this mechanism, Germany is proud to sponsor a network of climate and security advisors. And we are proud to co-lead the group of friends on climate and security here in New York, together with our partner, Nauru. Mr. President, in closing, let me underline that Germany's commitment to global peace and sustainable development remains as strong as ever. In times of uncertainty, Germany remains a reliable partner for the United Nations system and its member states. Our actions are guided by the belief that no one be left behind. I thank you.
I thank Her Excellency Ms. Gruller for her statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Nguyen Minh Vu, First Vice Foreign Minister of Vietnam.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, ministers and colleagues, I thank Guyana for organizing this important open debate. I also thank you and extend my delegation's appreciation to the Secretary General and others honorable briefers for the insight. I'd like to make 3 points. Firstly, I think that there's a common understanding around the table that there can be no lasting peace without sustainable development, and there's no sustainable development without lasting peace. And the Security Council is expected to not just realize, but to work more on this reality. Under the Security Council, primary responsibility is not to address poverty and underdevelopment. It played a pivotal role in shaping conditions for development through the maintenance of international peace and security. And in order to create good conditions for peace and security and development, we must give greater attention to the structural drivers of conflict: poverty, inequality, food insecurity, climate change, and the erosion of livelihood. These are not just development challenges, but also security challenges. And if not addressed properly, there can be triggers and even multipliers of conflict. And therefore, there's a need for a shift in mindset. Political solutions are not enough. A military solution should be minimized. A more sustainable solution must be a people-centered approach that places development at the heart of any peace effort, particularly in the security and the conflict-fragile regions and countries. And secondly, I speak from Vietnam's own experiences, emerging from decades of war, and with development at the center of our post-war effort, and with the support and assistance of both bilateral and multilateral development donors, including UN agencies. We have moved on, and with pride, been among 25 countries, having halved the multidimensional poverty index since 2010. I would say that Vietnam is a typical example of how important the UN role in global development, particularly in post-conflict settings. Through advancing development resilience and social cohesion, we have laid a strong foundation for sustained peace and inclusive growth in Vietnam for the past 50 years. From this very experience, during our non-permanent membership at the Council in 2010 and 2021, Vietnam places a strong priorities on the promotion of development in the peace and security agenda. We initiated Resolution 2573 on the protection of critical infrastructure essential to the survival of civilian populations in armed conflict. It is indeed an affirmation that even amid war, amid conflict, seeds of sustainable peace and development must be planted and must be protected. We hope that such momentum will continue going forward. And finally, from this perspective, we offer three proposals. First, the Security Council should systematically address development-related root causes of conflict in its deliberation and work. This point has been mentioned by many before, and I think that it should be done through the Security Council closer coordination with ECOSOC, with Peacekeeping Commission, and relevant UN agency. And second, poverty eradication, social inclusion, and investment in human capital and critical infrastructure should be prioritized across the entire conflict spectrum, from early warning and prevention to post-conflict reconstruction. And third, a more coherent whole system approach is needed to align peacekeeping, peace building, and development effort. Development priorities must be integrated into peacekeeping funding strategy with closer coordination between the Security Council, UN agency, financial institutions, and donors to support sustainable recovery in conflict-affected countries. As the United Nations approaches its 80th anniversary, it is a moment for reflection and recommitment. We must do more to uphold the original vision of the Charter, which sees peace, development, and human dignity as inseparable. Vietnam calls for a new cycle of well-funded and integrated global projects aimed at addressing poverty and underdevelopment in conflict-fragile countries and regions. I support Madam Kani representative from UNDP having just mentioned that we need more intentional global projects like that. So Vietnam remains committed to working with all partners to promote a more effective, inclusive, and sustainable peace and security agenda and sustainable development. Thank you so much.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Wolf for his statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Carlos Fernandez de Casio, Deputy Minister for Foreign Affairs of Cuba.
Señor Presidente,
Mr. President,
agradecemos la oportuna convocatoria a esta reunión promovida
Guyana
por
for promoting this meeting under the leadership of your President.
Ante todo, Cuba condena
First and foremost, Cuba strongly condemns the Israeli genocide against the Palestinian people and the recent and unjustified attacks against the Islamic Republic of Iran. Both crimes are supported and granted impunity by the government of the United States. Both flagrantly violate the Charter of the United Nations, international law, and they represent a new and dangerous escalation of the conflict in the Middle East.
At the
Millennium Summit in 2000, the historic leader of the Cuban Revolution, Fidel Castro Ruz, stated, and I quote, "Anyone can understand that the fundamental goal of the United Nations in the challenging century that is beginning is to save the world not only from war, but also from underdevelopment, hunger, disease, poverty, and the destruction of the natural means that are essential for human existence. And it must do so urgently before it is too late." End of quotation. A quarter of a century later, and as we approach the 80th anniversary of the organization, we are a long way away from saving the planet. A recent report by the Secretary General indicates that 47% of the Sustainable Development Goals, which are already conservative and limited, are not progressing at a sufficient pace, and 18% of them are regressing. So there is the risk that more than two-thirds of the 2030 Agenda Goals will not be met, with only 5 years remaining before the agreed deadline that was set in 2015. Now, more than ever, international peace and security are threatened by escalating conflicts, acts of aggression, unconventional wars, economic blockades, regime change attempts, and frequent violations of the UN Charter and international law. Enormous resources are squandered on the arms race, with global military spending rising alarmingly for the 10th consecutive year. In 2024, it reached $2.718 trillion. That's a 9.4% increase over 2023, driven by the war-focused policies and trajectory of the United States. Meanwhile, global poverty has not decreased, and hunger levels have drastically increased throughout the world. Conservative data indicates that in 2024, 670 million people were living in conditions of extreme poverty. More than 295 million people in 53 countries and territories experienced acute hunger, and the number of people facing catastrophic levels of hunger reached a historic high. It is urgent that we implement the Declaration on the Right to Development. The vast resources currently allocated to military spending must be directed towards reducing hunger and poverty in order to help bridge the $4 trillion annual investment gap that is needed to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals in developing countries. Underdevelopment and poverty resulting from the unequal distribution of wealth remain among the fundamental causes of the majority of conflicts. Lasting peace requires addressing and eradicating the root causes of conflicts, particularly the economic and social development problems stemming from centuries of colonization, slavery, plunder, and wars for the dividing up of the world. It is urgent to change the irrational and unsustainable model of production and consumption inherent in current capitalism. Developed countries must fulfill their historic responsibility to the global south and honor their commitments with regard to official development assistance. In this world where the philosophy of plunder prevails, it seems almost impossible to achieve the eradication of poverty and progress toward development. We cannot delay in building a new, just, democratic and equitable international order, as well as urgently reform the international financial architecture. The General Assembly must lead these efforts, and states must strengthen international solidarity and cooperation in order to eradicate poverty and move toward development. In the face of the dangers threatening humanity today, we will never abandon the aspiration of leaving future generations a world of peace, where the sovereignty of states is respected, where there is no interference in their internal affairs, and where the full exercise of people's right to self-determination is guaranteed, so essential for sustainable development. Thank you very much.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Fernandez de Casio for his statement. I now wish to remind all speakers to limit their statements to no more than 4 minutes in order to enable the Council to carry out its work expeditiously. The flashing light on the microphone will prompt speakers to bring their remarks to a close after 4 minutes. I now give the floor to the representative of Indonesia.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to thank Guyana for convening this meeting and the briefers for their valuable insights. As we mark the 80th anniversary of the UN this year, we need to reflect upon ourselves. Have we succeeded in saving our generation from the scourge of war and providing them with the better standards of life? The stark reality today may prove otherwise. From violence against the Palestinians in Gaza, the rising tension in the Middle East, to decades of conflict and instability in parts of Africa. Indeed, ongoing conflicts across the world deepen poverty and inequality, becoming breeding grounds for grievance, instability, and violence. With nearly half of the 1.1 billion people living in acute poverty are in countries experiencing war or fragility. Thus, peace and prosperity must be pursued in tandem. In this precarious time, the Security Council should prove that it can serve as a catalyst for peace, which in turn can bring prosperity to all humankind. On this note, I would like to share several points. First, investing in sustaining peace. In this regard, enhancing synergy between the Security Council and the work of the wider UN system is crucial. Greater alignment between the Security Council and the PBC, as well as the PBF, must be pursued to mobilize political and financial support. Closer cooperation with development actors must also be forged, ensuring that resources are available to deliver mandates on peace building and sustaining peace effectively. Second, supporting nationally owned peace building strategies. Inclusive participation and tailored responses are key in this effort to strengthen institutional capacities in addressing root causes, improving living conditions, and avoiding relapse. Our peacekeepers have witnessed firsthand the impact of these approaches on peace efforts. By supporting community empowerment, including through civil-military coordination, to build resilience of the populations, such as trainings to enhance skills.
Longer, displacing more than 120 million people from their homes, an unprecedented number of individuals with disrupted lives and futures. Solutions are in short supply because of rampant geopolitical mistrust and divisions. The global economy is slowing, trade tensions are rising, and the budgets are being